It is an immense pleasure, really an honor, to be visiting the collection of the Argiz family, Latin American art collection that is here in Florida, in South Florida. And it's a collection that specializes in Cuban art. We today have the opportunity of taking a look at the collection. I am not going to say the complete collection, as there are so many works and some of which we will not be able to get to. And we will be focusing on a specific moment in Cuban art history, the origins of modernism in Cuban art. This collection is very strong in various aspects of Cuban art, one of which is the first generation of the Cuban Avant-Garde, or as they were known in Spanish, the Vanguardia. We will be talking about this group of 12 artists, 11 men and 1 woman, born around the beginning of the 20th century, from the 1890s to the early 20th century, who started exhibiting their modern art in the 1920s. Specifically, in 1927, they presented the first exhibition of Arte Nuevo, new art, in Havana, where this group of young artists presented to the population of Cuba, 3.8 million people only at that time, their initiation in the art world. In the 1920s, a movement of artists, intellectuals, poets, and musicians were seeking to identify and defend national identity. And this was one of the top priorities of this group of artists and intellectuals around La Revista de Avance, a publication, a cultural publication that organized this first exhibition in 1927. Of the 12 top artists of this movement, of the first generation Vanguardia movement, this collection has excellent representations of 7 of these masters. And we will be talking precisely and specifically about these 7 artists. Their works, their history, their contributions, their extraordinary importance, not only to Cuban art, but to the movement of modernism in general. It is not so well known that 3 artistic movements have made very significant contributions. Artistic movements from Latin American countries have made very significant contributions to 20th century modernism in general. Of course, the Mexican muralist movement, the anthropophagia movement from Brazil, and the Vanguardia movement in Havana and in Cuba in general. So we are really honored, and we very much appreciate the opportunity of visiting this collection and being able to talk about these artworks. We began saying that the first generation Vanguardia artists from Cuba had various objectives, specific social objectives in their artistic movement. One of these objectives was to present a society that was multiracial, a society where other groups of races, specifically the Afro-Cubans, were making and had made significant contributions to the development of the culture of the nation. The first painting that we visit is a painting that precisely alludes to this objective of the Vanguardias. It is a painting by the top artist of the Vanguardia movement in terms of international recognition, in terms of valuation in the art market, Wifredo Lam. Blue Nude is a key painting from 1938 It is one of the early manifestations of black pride in the body of work of Wifredo Lam, a recognition to his race and an affirmation of the values and claims that the black peoples of Western societies were then in the 1930s, as this painting was from the later part of the 1930s, were then displaying in various cultural centers of the Western world. In New York and Chicago in the 1920s and 30s, the Harlem Renaissance had embarked in the New Negro movement with artists such as Jacob Lawrence and Archibald Motley, elevating the Negro's cultural contributions to America. In Brazil, the anthropophagic manifesto of Oswaldo de Andrade and his wife, modernist painter Tarsila do Amaral, they were expressing the contributions of Africans to South American modernism and culture in general. While in Cuba, the influences of poet Aimé Césaire from Martinique and the contacts of the Club Atenas, an organization of affluent Afro-Cubans that had developed bonds with other African-American communities in the 20s and 30s, promoted the negritude movement known as negrismo in Havana and Matanzas mostly. Negrismo was all about black pride. Poet Nicolás Guillén, folklorist Fernando Ortiz, and painters such as Alberto Peña and now Wifredo Lam, along with musicians such as Cindo Garay and many others, elevated the cultural contributions of Afro-Cubans to the country. Blue Nude is a key artwork to the better understanding of Wifredo Lam's rediscovery of his African roots. It was painted in Barcelona. As you all know, Wifredo Lam, born in 1902, went to Spain in 1923 at age 21 with a scholarship from the Havana municipal government and stayed in Spain from 1923 to 1938. The last years of his presence in Spain found him involved in the struggle for the superiority of democracy and the survival of the Spanish Republic. In the end, in the late 1930s, that cause was evidently lost, and Wifredo Lam first moved to Barcelona and later crossed into France. This painting was precisely painted in Barcelona shortly before Lam travels to Paris. It is recognized as a work produced in 1938, in the early months of 1938. In May of that same year, Lam has already crossed to France. This is important because this work was found 50 years after it was painted, along with another 100 works from the artist that were hidden there by a dear friend of the artist. In 1938, he left these works in Barcelona as he fled to France, saving his life from the revolutionary events that were taking place in Spain then. It was almost a miracle that Blue Nude had survived and had not totally disappeared through the Spanish Civil War and the Second World War. Blue Nude is crucial to prove my theory that negritude in Lam did not come from the influence of the African masks that he first saw in Paris, nor from the African-influenced Pablo Picasso paintings such as Damoiselle d'Avignon and others. Lam had embarked in the reconnection with his roots, African roots, before he reaches Paris in the late 1938. It is important to note that Lam was the son of a Chinese immigrant to Cuba and an Afro-Cuban mother who was the descendant of a woman slave with a Spaniard. So Lam had in his blood the presence of the European through his grandfather on his mother's side, the strong presence of the African, and also the presence of the Chinese. In a way, he was reuniting three ethnicities in his own persona. Blue Nude is arguably one of the most art historic important works in this collection, in this very distinguished collection. And it is a privilege to observe it alongside with its sister painting, La Lettre, the letter number 2. And now we visit the letter, a painting that was executed a few months after Lam painted the Blue Nude. He was already in Paris, and it is a privilege to rediscover for me this painting that I've known for many, many years. I first enjoyed it and found out about it at the Mario Amiguet home, where it was part of his collection, the deceased friend, for many years. The work was there for many years. He had bought it in Europe precisely and brought it to Miami, where it has been for a long, long time. One of the jewels of Cuban art in South Florida. The letter is a nostalgic painting from Lam's first few weeks in Paris in 1938. It is a self-portrait of the artist in its typical seated position, crossed legs, the head resting in his supportive arm and hand, while he meditates and probably remembers those left behind in Barcelona just a few months prior, when he had the good fortune of having escaped from Spain before the collapse of the Spanish Republic. I have known this painting since the early 1990s, and now we rediscover it in this illustrious collection. There is a second version of the letter, by the way, one that is known as letter number 1, and it belongs to another distinguished collection here in Miami. In all these three paintings, Blue Nude and the two letters, the artist utilizes geometric forms and radical angularity to disrupt the narrative and accentuate the tension. Lam knew the secrets of Cubism, but used them sparingly and rarely to deform or deconstruct. For Lam, geometry was not the end, but merely an ingredient. So we continue with Wifredo Lam and the important, very important museum quality paintings by this artist in this collection. The first two works that we took a look at, Blue Nude and the letter number 2, were paintings from 1938, basically sister paintings, with just a few months of difference one from the other. But now we jump to the 1950s, and we will be looking at, if possible, a work from the 1950s, actually 1955. We almost had the opportunity of including a major masterpiece from the 1940s, a 1945 canvas recently acquired by the Argiz family, but the work has not yet arrived. This gives us an excuse to come back another day. Let's talk about Si Possible, if possible, from 1955. It is a masterpiece with a prestigious provenance. It belonged to the legendary collector Joseph Cantor from Indianapolis. It was a work exhibited in Wifredo Lam's first one-person exhibition in the United States at the University of Notre Dame Art Gallery in 1961. This painting was also exhibited in the show Revistas Cubanas that I co-curated with Carlos M. Luis at the Cuban Museum of Arts and Culture in Miami in 1985. This work was briefly in our gallery for some time and also exhibited at Cernuda Arte in December of 2015, and it appears illustrated in the catalog Important Cuban Artworks, Volume 13. The painting went to the collection of Mr. Michel Santi, in Geneva, Switzerland, and for some time now it has been in the Argiz family collection. If Possible is a great work from the artist's distilled surreal period, where the symbols of Santeria are combined with dream-like shapes, triangular forms that clash with exuberant pigmentation to create a universe of conflict that approximates violence. The Elewas are angry when they exhibit their dentures. To round up the observation of these 7 magnificent Wifredo Lam works at the Argiz collection, we will be talking about 2 works from the late period of the artist, the 1970s. One of which is Personage and Bird that we have here. The 1970s is the time recognized as the late period of the artist Wifredo Lam. This quinquennial, from 1970 to 1975, marks the last quality productive push of Wifredo Lam. More than 800 paintings in 5 years were produced, most of which were later left to his wife and children as seed material support for the financial necessities of a successful art foundation, one that would divulge and promote the artist's history and achievements. In Personage and Bird, as well as in the 1972 untitled Gathering of Figures and Elewas, we see that Lam resorts to his artistic vocabulary of a lifetime, devoid of risky compositions or feats of draftsmanship, and with it embroids a narrative that encapsulates what is essential to his work. In this late period, he no longer needs to impress with superficial showmanship. Like the experienced shaman or babalao, he can reach the fundamentals with a stroke of the brush. Suffice to say, for today, about this master, except to add that we have it on good authority that very soon another Lam masterpiece will arrive at the Argiz collection.